Women's Soccer Review Podcast with Jonathan Tannenwald on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Welcome to the latest episode of the Women's Soccer Review here on the Sports Podcasting Network. I'm Jonathan Tannenwald of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Yes, it has again been 2 months since the last show. I realize that. I thank you all for your patience and understanding. I especially thank Kevin Laramie, my producer in Montreal, Dwayne Rollins, my colleague up in Toronto. I thank them very much for their understanding, their flexibility, their patience. They're allowing me to do this show around my real job, which, as you all have seen, I'm sure has made me very busy of late. I was at Carly Lloyd's last national team game in St. Paul, Minnesota. I was at her last club game with Gotham this past weekend. I'm doing a million things in the men's soccer world. And our guest on the show today is really just about as busy as I am. And I think we were actually going to meet in person for the first time, potentially, except that on the day when she ends up working a Philadelphia Union game, Lisa Roman, where else do I end up at Red Bull Arena and you're at Subaru Park? Welcome to the show. It's great to have you on.
It is so great to be here, Jonathan. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I understand the grind and the busy days that come out of it. It is championship playoff season in the world of fall sports and MLS soccer and NWSL. And hey, when the game's called, we answer, right?
Oh, that's absolutely true. And you get to actually broadcast them, which I just get to sit there and write about them. But look, I will say this very quickly about the season being busy. I do want to say this on the show and get it out of the way. Because this show is to preview the NWSL playoffs. And I'm not going to be able to watch either game at all. And possibly if I bring an iPad with me, but I'm going to be at Yankee Stadium on Sunday for the Philadelphia Union's regular season finale. If I was the NWSL, I don't think I would have put my playoff games up against decision day in MLS at the exact same hour. I understand they might not have had a choice. Lisa, I will spare you having to get in any trouble by commenting on that since it wasn't up to you, but it's not how I would have done it. The TV time on CBS Sports Network, I'm sure, is what they were able to get. It's not how I would have done it because you're competing for the same audience. There's my little soapbox bit right out of the gate, having not done a show for 2 months. And that's, here I go, right? Just turning on the fire blaster right away, right as we get going. The only other thing I will say about having not done a show in 2 months is this, and then we'll get into the meat of the show. I still hope to do a show on Tobin Heath at Arsenal. Had been working on something with some colleagues I have in London, and they fell apart, which is why it ended up being 2 months since the last show. This one did not have to stretch the proverbial tin can and string across the Atlantic Ocean. This one, I only had to go across town here in Philadelphia, which is pretty cool. For folks who don't know, Lisa is based here in Philly. I am based here. Lori Lindsay is based here. Marissa Pilla is based here. Those of you who watch the Premier League or who watch MLS will have heard the name Danny Higginbotham. He's based here. This little parochial backwater, Lisa, where you grow up, all of a sudden has all these soccer people in it. What are we doing corrupting the people of Philadelphia with the world's game? It's a terrible thing, right?
I mean, it's so fantastic that we have a crew and a little neighborhood of soccer people right here in Philadelphia. And as big as this city is and as small as it can be sometimes, I still don't run into you guys enough on the street or walking around or things like that. I'm sure we'll make it happen though, right? The Italian market, we'll hit it up together. We'll get some good grub and find some dinner.
It's absolutely true. And by Kate Scott too, I should add, who's the new TV voice of the Philadelphia 76ers, who's done some U.S. women's national team games for Fox Sports. And if you don't know who she is, folks, I would encourage you to look her up, look her reels up now, because you're going to be seeing a lot more of her on Fox in the years to come. And if that's tipping my hand a little bit about some things I've heard, I think I'm allowed to do that. No, you're absolutely right about the Italian market. I go walking down there most Saturday and Sunday mornings thinking that I'm going to run into Marissa or Lori or Jim Curtin, who lives not all that far from there. And then I realize, of course, they're all out of town every time that I try to do that. Marissa's at games. You and Lori are at Vista World Link down in Orlando calling games off monitors. And are you able to tell the people whether you're going to be calling games in the playoffs?
I will not be calling games in the playoffs. I'm allowed to spill those beans. It's a little hard for me to get there and do the travel. And when I get to Florida to call games, I like to do a few at a time. And because of the playoffs and the games being staggered just so, with only an hour and a half difference between kickoff times, you can't do both games. You can't do multiple games. So just not this time around for the playoffs. I'll still be covering them though for CBS and for Attacking Third, that podcast there. We do pre-games and post-games. We'll cover it all. So I will be tuned in. And Jonathan, I know you said you're going to be at Yankee Stadium covering the Union game. They have this thing called Wi-Fi. You can bring your iPad. You can still watch the NWSL games.
Yeah, I'm going to try I'm going to try, believe me. And yes, you mentioned the Attacking Third. That's her podcast for CBS with Sandra Herrera, who's been on this show a number of times before. Do go check that out. And I know that CBS is cooking up a whole lot of things, even after the NWSL season is over with women's soccer. What they are, well, you'll just have to stay tuned. That much I cannot yet say on this air in public, or else I would get in trouble. We are going to discuss the NWSL playoffs. I think we should just do the easy thing, which is take the games in chronological order. Take the 2 first-round games and then take the 2 second-round games. And so we will start with the Chicago Red Stars, the 4th seed, hosting Gotham FC, the 5th seed, 3:00 Eastern on Sunday. It is the CBS Sports Network TV game. Out of the 2 on Sunday, it is Carly Lloyd returning to the club where she played her first professional game in 2009. And as storylines go, those of us who fall for narratives, because that's what we do in the media, we're bad like that. It's certainly a narrative. There is this possibility that now every game that Carly Lloyd now plays, obviously, could be the last one she ever plays. Well, the last one she ever plays could be against the first team that she ever played for. There is so much to talk about with both of these teams, but I think we have to talk about Carly first. And not just because she's going to be the most famous person on the field. We know that. But she does have this reputation of scoring really big goals in really big games. And wouldn't it be something if Gotham is able to go on a run here and she's right in the middle of it?
I think it's very possible because of Carly Lloyd and who she is and what she does and how she scores goals. We very well may see her come up in these big moments and scoring goals against Chicago. But it's not as easy as that. And you mentioned Carly Lloyd, and this could be her last game. It very well may be. She's had a lot of farewells. I don't think it will be to tip my hat on who I have favored in this game, who I think will win. I don't think it'll be her last game. I think we'll see her make it to the semifinals because, like you said, Jonathan, she comes up big in these big moments. She hasn't been able to do it for Gotham in the last 3 matches. Now, she missed one of them due to international duty. She was with the national team on one of those makeup matches with Racing Louisville, but 3 ties for Gotham in their last 3 matches, 1-1 ties as well. So they're scoring goals, but they're also letting up goals when they really don't need to be. And they just need to figure out how to close the game a little bit sooner. And I think that's where the veteran dog eat dog world mentality that Carly Lloyd has will come into play. That no, she's not the defender on this team that's going to stop everything from happening, but she has the mindset and the leadership to be able to say to her team, I got us a goal. If that's what happens first in this match against Chicago, now we need to lock it down defensively and honestly close out the game. But I have a feeling that we could see a big Carly Lloyd goal in this matchup. It's a big game. It's a big game in the playoffs for Gotham against Chicago. And I have a feeling she could have one more up her sleeve.
It's interesting you mentioned, these ties because they were all blown leads too.
Yes.
Which I'm sure in that locker room is not going over very well.
No, you can't think of that at all, but blown leads. They have the lead and then they give up a goal. And you can give resilience to the other team, but I think it's a little bit of mental lapse from Gotham that we've seen. And now that Gotham goes on and they're facing Chicago in the first round of the playoffs, and Gotham's coach is Chicago's former assistant, Scott Parkinson. So he knows the Chicago system. He knows Rory Dames and how that team plays and everything like that, and how hard it is to play against a Chicago team. So does Gotham have the upper hand in that sense? Maybe. they have someone that was from the inside on their coaching staff. But the blown leads is what's really, really rough for Gotham. But they do have Margaret Purce back, who was out for a bit with injury. Now that she's back, it's been a different game for Gotham. They have way more weapons up top alongside Lloyd.
There are a lot of matchups in this game that I'm looking forward to, and Margaret Purce is at the center of what might be the biggest one, which is her against that Chicago backline, whether it's Sarah Gordon, whether it's Tierna Davidson, if it's Casey Kruger in particular, that one would really fascinate me. Potentially her going one-on-one with some of those players who she knows real well, has played against in the league, has played with on the national team. Just think inside of the field, if Kruger ends up playing on the left side and Purce is playing on the right, that's one I think we got to circle immediately.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think we will see Kruger there. She was out last match due to illness. So it's not a physical injury, but, an illness that hopefully with some medicine or some time you can get over, not knowing what the specifics of that illness are. So I imagine we'll see Kruger out there, and yeah, she'll be matched up with Purce. And that is definitely something you're circling. That flank will be very active because Kruger also likes to get up. I know we're talking about Purce and getting into the attack, but when Kruger sneaks forward, that's Purce's mark. She needs to drop back and make sure she stays tight on Casey Kruger. But it'll also be difficult because Gotham has Anamanu up top, who's also really quick. So Sarah Gordon's going to need to turn on the jets, which we know Sarah Gordon, center back for the Red Stars, can do. She's one of the speediest players in this league. But yeah, the Kruger Purce matchup, it's going to be difficult to see who gets end line and who crosses the ball in more. I don't know. Casey sat out last match for Chicago, and I think she's sad about that one, and she wants to prove that she deserves to be there. And also both those players, they're looking at national team stuff coming up in January. The January camp for Blacko and Anofsky is around the corner, and both of those players are players that could be big parts of that camp. And now's the time to shine.
Well, they could be big parts of that trip to Australia too, I think, especially Casey Kruger. And I'm gonna turn to Mal Pugh now because there's going to be an enormous spotlight on her because she's been playing really well. Obviously, she was just in Houston watching Dansby Swanson win the World Series. Before we discuss Mallory Pugh, again, I'm going to avoid getting you in any trouble, but I need to get this out of the way because I've been asked about it. It's been all over social media. I think we all know why. So I'm just going to say this. I don't know whether Mal Pugh is going to Australia. Right now, the number of people who know whether Mal Pugh is going to Australia is probably 5 or 10. She's one of them. Vlatko Andonovski is one of them. Kate Markgraf is one of them. The Players Union chief is probably one of them. I can't publicly speculate on this show because it would be journalistically irresponsible of me to speculate publicly as to whether Mal Pugh is going to Australia. If she's not on that roster, we will all find out at the same time, and we will have the opportunity to ask Vlatko why she's not on the squad. That's the most I can say about it without getting in any trouble, without getting Lisa in any trouble.
My lips are sealed.
Y'all can figure out the rest of the subject matter from here. I just can't say the rest of it on the record because it's just not the right thing for me to do. But I will talk about Mal Pugh's performance on the field because she has earned her way back into the national team by on-the-field performance with how she has done with Chicago. And now she's going to play against Gotham, the team she played for some last year. And, we talk about how big a spotlight Carly Lloyd's going to be in with Gotham. In terms of individual players on Chicago, I think Mal might be in the brightest one.
Yeah, she's definitely a player that opponents circle when they know they're about to face Chicago. And you can be certain that Gotham is watching game film of Mallory Pugh and they're keying in on what she does well and honestly where her weak points are in the attack for Chicago. But she's a really tricky player to defend because she has so many different weapons in her back pocket. She's really quick and she can get in behind. She can lose defenders. She has the intelligence to also drop back behind defensive lines in between midfield lines and defender lines, pick up the ball, turn and run at speed at defenders, which is really difficult. And then her technical ability on the ball is is really impressive for a forward that has so many other weapons, that she can still dance on the ball and use moves and footwork like a center mid, like some of the other center mids in this league in the NWSL. She's almost better than some of them with her footwork and the skills that she can do. So as a defender, I played defense and I'm a defender, so I naturally have that defensive mindset. When I look at a player like Mallory Pugh, I think, okay, where's her weakness? Where can I try to stop her? Or what do I want to force her to do? Because she's going to do what she's going to do something on the ball when she gets it. You can't just take it from her every single time. But what do you force her to do? So you force her to her weakest point. And it's really hard to find one for Mallory Pugh. What is that weakest point? Because if you give her space, she'll dribble at you and she'll do a move and she'll get around you. But if you stay too tight, she'll use her quick step and her fast restart and her quick change of direction to get around you and lose you. I think Mallory Pugh is going to be a player that could be a game changer for Chicago, and she needs to be a game changer for Chicago.
I'm going to ask about one other Chicago player. I'm going to put it in the context of central midfield. I'm going to get myself in an enormous amount of trouble on Twitter for raising the subject, but I do this on this show. I just go wading straight into the muck and go take a shower afterward or whatever. Morgan Gautrat versus Allie Long and McCall Zerboni. And Gautrat gets, I don't want to say ignored, but undervalued by, I think, a segment of the populace for a number of reasons. One is the position she plays. It's not always glamorous. Another is that caucus of people which says, okay, when you're back in the national team, we'll find out. And that's just, it's not always fair, but that's one of the judgments that gets cast. As you've watched her this year, is she back at a level where you think she might be on that plane to Australia?
This is a question that I've actually thought a lot about, Jonathan, and what Morgan Gautrat can do. And I think a lot of people think she's older than she is because she plays a lot older, and her IQ on the field is a lot more mature than a lot of other midfielders, but she's young. She's 28, I believe, 27, 28. Yeah. She's a young player. She has a lot of soccer life left back in her. And the difference that Gautrat makes when she's on the field and in the midfield for Chicago versus when she's not is drastic. It's a make or break game for Chicago, depending on how Gautrat is playing. And I think it's so dangerous for Gautrat because she plays on both sides of the ball really, really well. A lot of times when you look at defenders, even like when you look at Gotham and you have Allie Long and McCall Zerboni, Allie Long is much more defensive on the ball, and she can pick out those pockets and she can find those holes and pick off passes. And then she gives it to McCall, or she finds Lloyd's feet, and then they create a lot of the magic. But with Morgan Gautrat, she's a player that defensively can sit in holes and read passes and break up transitions for opponents really well. And then also be creative in the attack. She doesn't just distribute really quickly, which is a lot of times what we see from defensive midfielders and more defensive minded center of the park players. She's not like that. She can also play that really creative attacking midfielder position. I don't know if she'll be going to Australia. I think it would be in Vlatko Andonovski's interest and best interest to maybe try her out there. Now is the time. You can get her game minutes. These games don't mean too much for the national team. There's going to be holes to fill come next year in that midfield, but the midfield for the U.S. women's national team isn't that deep. It's really not. So to add in another player like that in the mix that could slot into that defensive midfield position, we saw what happened when Julie Ertz goes down. Who can step in? It's Andy Sullivan. So you might need another one. You never know what can happen. I would love to see her on the roster and get minutes with the current women's national team and see what she could do, especially because if Mallory Pugh is or is not traveling, but despite going to Australia, but on this roster for the national team, they know each other so well, and that combination could be fun. And then you have Tierna Davidson behind. It's just like a whole full Chicago picture on the national team.
It's the central defensive midfield point is very interesting, and one that I'm sure Vlatko Andonovski is thinking a whole lot about. And this, we might do a show when the roster gets announced, because what we do know is this is the first roster where Vlatko does not have to call in any of the Olympians. He can call in whoever he wants.
Mm-hmm.
And all indications are he's going to go, I don't want to say blow things up, although he has the opportunity now to blow things up, which a lot of us are waiting for. I don't think he's going to call in that many veterans. We'll see. And it's going to open space for a lot of people. I want to move on to Washington, North Carolina, which is the late game on Sunday, 5:30 on Paramount Plus, exclusively at Audi Field in our nation's capital. And Washington, look, there are so many stories, obviously, off the field about both these teams. We know what they all are. I have not discussed them. I discussed them some on the last show we did 2 months ago, but that was before Meg Linehan's expose on the allegations against Paul Riley. Everybody knows what has been put out there now. Everybody knows, I hope, that Lisa and I, by the nature of our jobs, have to put the word alleged in front of everything that is out there, even with all the evidence. But it is remarkable that this Washington team, even with the forfeits, finished third in the East. Ashley Hatch won the Golden Boot. Trinity Rodman has broken out already. They do not always get the attention of some of the more glamorous teams in the league. But this Washington Spirit team, for all that it has been through, for all the upheaval, for the coach getting fired for all of the alleged abuses, everything that has gone on, for the waiting for Steve Baldwin to sell the team, all of this, they could have won the Shield.
Yeah,
easily. You know, if you imagine if somehow all was right with the world, this team could have won the Shield. They're really good.
Yeah, I mean, even if they didn't have to forfeit 2 matches, it could have been a different picture. And still, when they did forfeit 2, they still finished third. They still get to host a first-round game, and they're in the playoffs. They're one of the earlier teams to clinch a playoff, and they missed 2 games. I think that says so much to what they were able to do on the field and how much Washington Spirit as a team, they're really friends off the field, and they have a lot of personnel that are really mindful. And I think that helped them this season. They have players like Tori Huster, who is a veteran in the league, is a veteran in Washington Spirit. And she's a player that represents for the Players Association and represents not only her team, but she's head of the Players Association. So to be in that type of role and have that type of position as a player like that, who is so influential in the midfield for your Washington Spirit team, and to be able to rally around some of these younger, newer players in the league and say, let's separate this. Let's try to separate what's happening off the field from on the field and still clinch playoffs and still host a quarterfinal game. It's really impressive. And the future for Washington Spirit, it is scary.
Yeah, it is. Trinity Rodman, 6 goals and 5 assists this year. Ashley Hatch won the Golden Boot with 10 goals. Ashley Sanchez played 22 games. You got just so many incredible, as you say, young players on that team. Tegan McGrady's another one. Sam Staub's another one. But the stat to me, if I got to pick one number out of this Washington team that maybe hasn't gotten as much attention as it could have, it is 19, the number of games played by Andy Sullivan this year, after all that she has been through with all the injuries that she has had. And every time I watch her play, I feel like there's this giant flashing arrow over her head says the future of American soccer is that way. And everybody's seen her now. Everybody listening to this show has seen her with the Spirit, with the national team. And I don't know how else to say it except she is that good.
She is that good. She is that good. It's that impressive to watch. And I said it's going to be scary, the future of this team. Andy Sullivan keeps getting better.
Yeah.
That's something else that's really, really impressive. Even her time with the national team, every time she gets on the field, she changes her game a little bit. She gets a little bit more smarter in her positioning and her vision of the field. And she gets better on what she can do. And she stepped in seamlessly to that role. But her leadership on Washington Spirit has been I think, a difference maker this year for them, because she can just let the fast, quick ones up top and Hatch, Sanchez, Rodman just run. And she's like, don't worry about getting back. I'll cover everything on defense, and be that big block in the middle of the park. She is the future. Yes, she is the future. That's what I mean. The future of Washington Spirit is scary good, scary talented. And if they can stick together and stay and battle through the adversity that they faced this season off the field, there's no limit for that team.
I am falling once again into the sports talk radio host mode, where I just say declarative things and throw to the guest instead of asking a question and throwing to the guest, which is how you're supposed to do it. But I'm going to say a declarative thing and throw to the guest again, which is, okay, I will try to phrase this in the form of a question. Do you also see that when Andy Sullivan plays the 6 for the national team instead of Lindsey Horan, who is a great player, but there is a difference because Lindsey Horan is not a true 6. When I was out in St. Paul, I in particular noticed this, that Andy Sullivan's a true 6, and it makes a big difference with the national team. There's teams that Lindsey Horan can play the 6 against, sure, but it makes a real big difference when she or Julie Ertz is back there, and you see what the value of a true 6 is. And, as you watch the national team, Lisa, with Andy in it, do you see the difference that she's already making too?
Yes, completely. Lindsey Horan is not a 6, and she can do it because she's a good enough player that it can work in her favor. But that's the same as saying, like, if you look at a player like Mallory Pugh, yes, if we needed her to play outside back, she could probably do it and be okay, and the whole world wouldn't crumble. But Lindsey Horan is not a 6. She is an attacking player. She needs to be on the ball, not defending it. And I'm going back to our conversation a few minutes ago. Morgan Gautrat could be in that mix as a defensive 6 for the national team, because injuries happen. And as unfortunate as they are, your backup can't be an attacking midfielder. It can't be Lindsey Horan moving forward. When you look at the World Cup, it's not going to cut it against other teams. And if Andy Sullivan is in there and she can stay healthy, I think she could be the go-to that Vlatko Andonovski sees in that position. But there needs to be more rotation in that role and more competition, honestly. If there's stricter and tougher competition in training at the national team level between Ertz and Sullivan for that position, and it doesn't just come down to injuries, it will elevate that role, and it will elevate the midfield for the team, which will ultimately elevate the team as a whole. But yeah, Andy Sullivan, she's a lockdown at the national team level. And then when you throw her in Washington Spirit against players that aren't quite at the national level, she just stands out that much more in her abilities to pick up the slack where other people leave it on the ground.
So if the Spirit are the future, they're going to come up against a very veteran-laden team in North Carolina. Mm-hmm. Amy Rodriguez, Jess McDonald, Abby Urseg, Debinha, Lynn Williams. You're going to have me face a front 3 of McDonald, Debinha, and Williams in the playoffs. I mean, that's their time of year. And it's going to be, for all the turmoil the Courage have been through, I don't think it's at all fair to say that the Courage dynasty is over. I think they'll be right back next year, no matter who the manager is, whether it's Sean Nass or somebody else. But it's the time of the year when the veteran game winners get out there on the field and make a difference in a one-game scenario. And boy, do the Courage just have still, even with Sam Ewis out, they've still got so many of them.
They do, but I'm going to argue that Amy Rodriguez hasn't done much for them since the trade happened between Kansas City and North Carolina, and A-Rod came to the Courage. She hasn't found her place yet. She's been okay, and she's had really moments of greatness, but she is a player that traditionally shines. And you give her the ball and she's going to do something fantastic with it, and she's going to progress the team and progress the ball down the field into the attack and be that person for your team. And she hasn't done that for North Carolina. And yes, there's been so many things happening off the field, but also A-Rod is a veteran. And she could have been a little bit better in doing that. And I'm being harsh here, of course. I make these elaborate statements about how players can be better and what they should do to be better. and they're still doing it at the highest level. They're still one of the best, but I don't think that North Carolina has been as lethal in their attack this year. I mean, they haven't. It's proven they haven't. This is the first time that North Carolina, yes, they still made the playoffs, but it's the first time that they're not the number 1 seed heading into the playoffs.
That's a remarkable streak.
It is a remarkable streak, but it's also because they haven't been scoring a lot of goals, and they've had to rely a lot on their defense. And Casey Murphy, their goalkeeper for the Courage, she has 11 shutouts on the year, but you can't rely on her to do all the work. You can't make it a 1 goal difference in a match. You have to be able to score goals. And I think Lynn Williams has been off the last few weeks. I'm hoping that the playoffs get her back into form. And now that Paul Riley is out of North Carolina and they're trying to start over with a clean slate, and there's been a lot of turnover in the league and progress being made towards what needs to happen and player safety focus and transparency. I'm hoping Lynn Williams can come out of her funk a little bit, score goals, and be a bit more relaxed. That's it. She just needs a massage, some tea, a glass of wine, and then go hit the field, and we'll see some goals from Lynn Williams.
So we'll touch here on the Reign and the Thorns, who are the teams that have the byes. The Reign will host the first semifinal. Both games are on the 14th of November. Both games are on CBS Sports Network. The Reign will host Washington or North Carolina. And I'll save the question I was about to ask for a moment. I'll put it this way. The Reign's game against Kansas City that they played end of the regular season. One of the goals gets scored, and there's 5 people in the camera frame at the same time. Megan Rapinoe, Eugenie Le Sommer, Jennifer Marajan, Jessica Fishlock, and Rose Lavelle. And I looked at that and I said, oh, beat that. I mean, it's and Laura Harvey is out there coaching and making it all work, which is to her great credit, because not every coach on the earth. Some people say, oh, yeah, just throw the talent out there and let them play. No, it's not that easy.
No.
But my goodness, I mean, we know they're stacked.
They're
we always know they're stacked. But now they're really showing it, and everybody's playing, and they're playing well together.
I mean, it would almost be a waste of a good cake if they weren't playing as well as they are, because like you said, they have all this talent and they are so stacked. Yes. So much credit to Laura Harvey and how she's been able to bring that out of those players, because not everyone needs to pull it out of them, but there are definitely moments when Rose Lavelle, she needs a little nudge to be better than she was yesterday. And I think the credit does go to Coach Harvey in that role. But yeah, I mean, if they were on the pitch and not doing all these fantastic things, it would be a bit of a disappointment, to be frank.
There's times when I look at their starting lineups and wonder who plays the 6 for them. I mean, sometimes Quinn does, and they're really good at it, obviously. But there's times when they just sort of throw everybody out there and then they just go stomp people. Yeah. And like, I don't know what's going to happen with this, because whoever they're playing is going to be coming across the country and everything else. They might go stomp somebody. They might just go stomp some people. I don't know.
I think they will.
Fun to watch.
I think they will. You're so right about who's playing the 6, because Quinn, they get forward a lot and they rotate around. The midfield is, they're not set in positions. And I think that when you have players that are so good and so talented, like the 6 in the middle and the front line for OL Reign, they are so talented, but they're also really smart, and they've played with a lot of different teams and a lot of different people and for a lot of different years. Because of that, they can see the rotation that's happening on the pitch when Lavelle pushes forward, which she does randomly streak forward down the field with the ball. Who's going to fill in that hole behind her? And sometimes we see Rapinoe dropping in a little bit to play more of a midfield role, and then Fishlock winds up running and streaking forward as well. But it's because they're all really smart and they've seen different formations, and a lot of them have played forward and have played mid and have played defensive. And because of that, they can find that automatic rotation and switch through the run of play.
One other in the underrated stat category, speaking of former Stanford players, Alana Cook, 19 games played, 19 games started, 90 minutes all the way through. she's surely going to be on that plane to Australia, and her time's coming.
Should be.
Her time's coming, and we've all known it for a while, to be fair. But I think now, really, like we're hitting that horizon now where her time's here, and I'm not trying to retire anybody, but I think we all know that the U.S. needs center back depth, and they need to get into a situation where they can rotate a lot of center backs and be okay, and also have, a few people who are playing a lot. And I think Cook's got the talent to be one of those who are playing a lot. And I'm not just saying that because she went to high school in South Jersey. I want to ask about the Thorns to close, because it's their time. Not only is it their time of year, as we know, they're going for something that's never been done before in American women's soccer history, which is 4 trophies in 1 year. And we take their success almost for granted, I feel like, because they've just been so good for so long. But somebody's going to have to bring it up. And again, might be me, I might have to do this, that Mark Parsons only got at most 2 games left in charge of the Thorns.
Oh, it's so sad.
And is he going to get sent off here with the sweep? Because when they won the ICC in the summer, we were all talking about it. And now it's time, I'll let you pick the players this time who you're watching on this Thorns team. I mean, we know the big ones, obviously, but what do you think of the ones who are going to step up here if they're going to win their semifinal over Gotham or Chicago and then go east to Louisville and win the whole thing?
Well, my initial gut reaction truly sticks with the theme that we've been discussing, Jonathan. We're picking out the 6s on these squads, and you have to look at Angela Salem when you look at Portland. And it's such an influential position on the field, and she is someone that her consistency changes the game for Portland. Yeah, I mean, the success they've had on the field, it's because they have a lot of stars as well, but it's also because they're all really bought into the mindset and the foundation that Mark Parsons has laid at Portland and throughout the Thorns organization, is that everyone's bought into this mentality that they are the best and they can be the best and they can continue to be the best. It's not like they don't have this chip on their shoulder, and they're not cocky about it, but it's more that they have this unshakable faith in themselves as a team and faith in the players standing next to them, which some teams don't have. You don't always trust the person that's standing to the left and to the right of you when you're on the pitch, and what's going to happen when they get the ball. Do I need to cover for them because they're going to make a mistake? But when you watch Portland play, they have this faith in each other and faith in the teammates standing next to them and this belief that they're going to do well. And I think it starts with Mark Parsons and how he's laid the foundation for this team. And then when you pick out a player like Angela Salem, she's the glue of this team, and she's the glue in what brings them all together. And she's right at that middle of the park to kind of connect with the players like Christine Sinclair and Becky Sauerbrunn, who have been around the game for so long, but also teach it to younger guys in Weber and Sophia Smith that are also doing a lot of that work. Even Menges has done fantastic in the center back too, but I picked out Angela Salem because how could I not? She's just done so well.
Oh, I don't blame you. And everybody talks about all the star power on this team, of course, because that's what we always do. Mm-hmm. 17 goals allowed in 24 games this season by the Thorns. No one else. Gotham's second in terms of goals allowed with 21. That is really stingy. And
it's no goals, Jonathan. And
right.
We have to remember that Adriana French was the starting goalkeeper. She goes to the Olympic. Bella Bigsby steps in. She does a fantastic job, and French gets traded away. And now it's the backup goalie who has had this tremendous season for Portland.
I'm going to throw one other name out there and be real quick about it because we're going to wrap up the show here in a moment. If you are a listener of this show, are you getting this show in the Sports Podcasting Network's overall stuff or whatnot? You're a casual follower of women's soccer. You don't You don't know all the names necessarily on all the teams. You need to watch Sophia Smith because you're going to be watching Sophia Smith for a long, long time. She is one of my favorite players on the Thorns because she is just a classic number 9 in. I'm gonna put her in the class with Abby Wambach and Alex Morgan because she's got that much potential in her. She goes into all the ugly spaces. She goes right smack in the middle of the 18-yard box, does all the hard running. She was Portland's leading scorer this year with 7 goals in 21 games. She's been scoring. I know she's been playing on the wing for the national team. I think that is only a matter of circumstance and Carly Lloyd and Alex Morgan being around. The time will come when she is the starting number 9 for Vlatko Ananovsky, and I think it will be soon. And she has all of the tools.
And she's only 21.
Yeah.
That's the fun fact about her. She's so young. She's so much more to grow and to do.
And she's got, I'm not a tactics savant person. I'm a falls for narratives person, as I mentioned earlier. But the tactics savants among you, watch her, focus on her, and you will see all the pieces of a big time number 9. All right. We have gone through the 6 teams. We have done all that we are supposed to do. You and I both, unfortunately, have things to get to rather shortly as we are recording. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We will, I'm sure, run into each other soon enough. I doubt I'm going to be able to make this happen before it starts snowing, but some Tuesday or Wednesday, when we're all in town, we should go to Fido, commandeer the outdoor TV, and watch some games in the middle of the afternoon together and just shoot the breeze and have a lot of fun. Hopefully we'll get to do that at some point. Lisa Roman is on Twitter at LRoman32. She is on CBS Sports and Paramount Plus calling NWSL games. She is on the Attacking Third podcast. You should subscribe to that. As I said at the top of the show, hopefully it will not be 2 months before the next one of these episodes. I've been putting a lot lately into my work at the Inquirer. You all have seen how much of it has been subscriber only recently because, hey, we are trying to get you to subscribe. You may have noticed that. And it's been some really good stuff that I've been really proud of, especially, yes, it's true, the things I've written about Carly Lloyd. And we have, as you may have noticed, sort of buried the hatchet on some of the things that went down with me and her in the past, which I'm very happy about. I got to meet her parents at the Gotham game that were sitting right behind the press section. That was very cool. They're very nice people. And as you saw in the video that Steve, Carly's father, did that U.S. Soccer posted, they're just over the moon to be reunited with their daughter. And I think that's a really, really terrific story as Carly Lloyd closes out her career here. Lisa, thanks again. For my producer, Kevin Laramie up in Montreal, my colleague, Dwayne Rollins in Toronto, go listen to Soccer Today to get so much more about what's going on in the soccer world. I'm Jonathan Tannenwald of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thank you so much for listening to the Women's Soccer Review here on the Sports Podcasting Network.